honor to have today Mindy Henderson. She is a motivational speaker and writer. Her new book is coming up soon. After today's session, I know you're going to be wanting and counting down for her book to go out to grab a copy. She's the host of the Truth About Things That Suck podcast, also the host of the National Muscular Dystrophy Association. I think I said that correctly. Quest podcast, and their editor-in-chief of their magazine. She was recently named Austin's Women to Watch by the Austin's Women magazine. Here is with us the amazing Mindy Henderson. Hello, Mindy. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm so glad to be here.
Oh my God, we have been talking about getting together and having you on the Leading Yourself podcast for so long. And for one reason or another, we haven't. And I'm just thrilled to have you here today for the Thrive Conference.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and I thank you for including me.
Yeah, it's such an honor. Your story is so inspiring, and as I said, I can't wait for your book to come out. I've been asking, when is that book coming out? Because I want a copy of the book.
Oh, you're
We
so
just had
sweet.
Scott right before you, and you just missed him, but he was talking about how amazing you are and how excited everyone is going to be to hear from you. So I'm going
Oh,
to
well,
leave the stage to you. I'll be monitoring questions, and I'll be back at the end to share with you any questions that our audience have for you. Thank you
sounds.
again, Mindy, for being here. The stage is all yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Scott is a tough act to follow, but I'm going to do my best. Well, again, I am just so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to coming in and speaking with all of you. So, like Carolina said, I'm a speaker, a writer, editor-in-chief of the Quest platform of content for the National MDA organization, which means that I basically oversee production of their quarterly magazine, a monthly newsletter, a blog, and I also host their podcast where I get to have just some incredible conversations about things that are important to the community of individuals with disabilities, things like air travel and accessibility and disability in the media and all kinds of really exciting topics. But at the mission of all of what I do, I really strive, and I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but I strive to leave the world a little bit better than how I found it. And by that, I mean a world where inclusion is the norm, where people see possibilities instead of limitations, and where no challenge is too big to overcome. And I pursue this mission in part by speaking and writing and interviewing people about things that suck. And that's what I'd like to talk to you guys about today. See, I've made a little bit of a study in life about the things in life that suck. I've lived some sucky things and I've figured some things out along the way that have helped me and helped me so much that I've created, like Carolina said, a podcast called The Truth About Things That Suck. And I've made such a study of it over the years and have learned so much from my own life and the lives of others that I've had the pleasure of speaking with that I've written a book by the same name. Again, like Carolina said, it'll be out in the fall of 2022. So I'm really excited about that. But today, I would like to talk to you a little bit about my story, some of the challenges that I've faced and what I've learned along the way. And my hope is that it will bring some new perspective on whatever you may be facing today or may face tomorrow. And the one thing, one thing that I want to call out here is that, our challenges in the moment or in life could be similar or they could be wildly different. And I want to impart here, what I want to impart here is that whether our own struggles look similar or not, adversity is universal. and the tools and the strategies and the pathways through it can be universal as well. So, the first truth about things that suck is that unfortunately, at one time or another, or many times over the course of our lives, things are going to suck. And I don't say that to be a buzzkill, but I do say it because it's the truth. Now, the question that may be the most natural to ask is why? Why is it that every once in a while things are going to have to suck? And so I think that there's some power, whoopsie. I think that there's some power when you're drilling into a specific subject to look at a definition of the word. Theoretically, I'm sure we all know what adversity is, but I went ahead and looked up the definition of adversity in my friend Webster's dictionary. And the definition is a difficult situation or condition, misfortune, or tragedy. And then synonyms of the word adversity are catastrophe, disaster, trouble, and misery. Now, these are not good things, you guys, but like we've already kind of established, bad things are going to happen. Adversity is everywhere. It shows up in our offices, in our homes, in our relationships, in our bank accounts, in our doctor's offices. And like I said, it will likely look different to everyone, and some struggles are incredibly visible, like my wheelchair, except, today you may not be able to see it, but it's there. But if you saw me out somewhere, you could look at me and probably guess with some degree of accuracy what the challenges are, or some of the challenges are that I've faced in my life. But if you look around most rooms and the people in it, who knows what anyone is facing in their own private lives. And the older I get, the more important it is to me to talk about this point. We all go all kinds of places all the time. Maybe less during a pandemic, but still, some of us go to work. We run errands. We're at the grocery store. We're at the bank. We're at the gas station. And we have no idea what the person who just passed us in the grocery store may be facing when they go home at night. And that person who was just rude to us, they may be having the worst day of their lives. And most of the time, we have no idea what struggles exist or have existed in another person's lives that may inform how they treat us. So I personally try to give everyone I can the benefit of the doubt who treats me badly. I chalk it up to the idea that they must be having a bad day, because small kindnesses really cost us nothing. A smile, a compliment, or an encouraging word might be the one thing that stranger needed in that moment to be able to get through their day. And honestly, I don't really see a downside to being kind. Worst case scenario, someone may actually not appreciate it or return it, but then what's it cost you? You can walk away knowing that you've behaved in a kind way that you can feel good about. And it's not that I'm excusing bad behavior, not at all. What I am saying is that we just don't know what may have happened in another person's life to cause them to behave the way that they did. So give them the benefit of the doubt. If nothing else, like I said, you're going to feel better. So I've given you the definition of adversity, but let's talk about why bad things happen. And I like to start this conversation with utopia. So imagine, if you will, for just a minute, a world where nothing bad ever happens. Everyone has a roof over their head, an abundance of family and friends, food on their table, maybe a little money in their bank account. That sounds pretty good, right? But let me play devil's advocate for just a second and ask a few questions. If we never saw a person with an illness or a disability, how could we know compassion? And if we never saw a person with no home, how could we feel grateful for our own? And if we never donated our time, our money, or our blood to victims of natural disasters, how could we ever feel generosity? The bad things in life, I believe, serve to define the good. I think that adversity has to exist in order to give a definition to the good things in our lives. Without the bad, we could never appreciate the good. We wouldn't even know what the good was. The good things in life would just be a superficial acceptance of gifts with no meaning. There would be no reason to even give them a second thought because they would be just things that happened every single day and we wouldn't know how special they are. The challenges that we endure and that we watch each other endure culminates in a world full of people who are generous and grateful and compassionate. Those are characteristics that I strive to have. And honestly, that is the world that I want to live in, not a world where everything is perfect all the time and where we don't even know the perfection because we've never experienced anything else. So the first time that things really sucked for me, I was only about 15 months old. I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular condition called spinal muscular atrophy, which is a progressive neuromuscular condition that's gotten worse over time and did, in fact, sentence me to life in a wheelchair. And there was a lot less known about this condition when I was an infant. Along the way, my parents were told some pretty terrible things. They were told that I would, in fact, continue to lose all of my ability to stand and walk, which I'd only just started to do. They were told that I would lose all of my cognitive function, and they were told that I probably would not live to be 3. And I feel like it's important to also mention that when all of this went down, my parents were only in their 20s at the time and had my sister at home who was only about 2.5, 3 years old at the time. And they found themselves, if you can imagine, in their 20s having to figure out how to navigate a complicated medical system where we had to go on sort of this medical scavenger hunt to get an accurate diagnosis of what was wrong with me with 2 children at home under the age of 3, where they were being told that one of them, arguably the cuter of the 2, would not live to be 3. So I was diagnosed by the head of neurology at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. And despite the fact that the absolute experts in the world were telling my parents that the situation was hopeless, they made an important decision. Fortunately for me, they wanted to know that if this was how the story was going to go, that they had done absolutely everything they could to help me. And so my dad had played football for the University of Wisconsin. He was actually pretty good. He was scouted by the pros and he knew a thing or two about injuries and anatomy and physiology and physical therapy. And he started to work with me. And it was slow and it was kind of subtle, but eventually I did start to get stronger. And then I had a third birthday, and I've had a lot more birthdays since then. I am not going to tell you how many. And clearly, I'm sitting here talking to you today. So, really relatively quickly, 2 out of 3 of the doctor's predictions for me were proven untrue. And the thing is, I don't remember living through this story. I think we've all got these stories in our lives that somebody at some point told us, but I don't remember who told me the story. I don't remember living through it. It's just knowledge that I've always had. It's something I've always known. And in that process, my parents really set the tone for my life and were my first examples of hope and determination and perseverance in the face of what the absolute experts in their field were telling my parents was a hopeless situation. And I think that as a result, I really put a lot of stock in hope. In fact, I've personally kind of stricken the word hopeless from my vocabulary. In fact, I believe that the word hopeless is kind of the F bomb of adversity because once you lose hope, um, life can turn really quickly into this quicksand that is so hard to pull yourself back out of. See, hope is not something to be feared. All hope is the belief that something is possible. And I'm a realist. I'm the first to admit that sometimes there are zero indications that anything else could possibly be. But hope is about believing anyway. The future is a mystery, right? Not many of us are able to look ahead and see the future. So if you can't see it and you can't confirm with any certainty what is to be, I say, why not believe in the best possible scenario? The worst thing that will happen is that you'll be disappointed if the outcome isn't what you'd hoped for. Don't presuppose pain and suffering. Even if all indications, all history, all the experts, all the facts point to something bad happening, if you can believe that something else could be possible, you hold the power. Don't let a foregone conclusion rob you of hoping for, and by extension, maybe getting something better. Because I believe that by having hope and by being unwavering in it, it can actually set off a chain of events that actually do produce a better outcome. If you have hope, you're thinking positively, which can seep into your decisions, your actions, your behavior, your words, your openness to options, the way that others perceive you and your circumstances and interact with you, and potentially then act in your favor. In life, there are all kinds of twists and turns and unseen forces and things that people don't know, and outside factors and influences, and inside factors and influences, and any number of things that could potentially impact how something will play out. So I say, if things are going to suck every once in a while, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to hold on to that hope and to know that things are going to be okay. So, if the first truth is that things will, in fact, need to suck every once in a while, then the second truth about things that suck is that we should talk about the idea that even though we can't control everything that might happen to us in life, we can 100% control how we respond to it, like my parents did. I used to say that everything happens for a reason. And the more that I've kind of studied this topic and lived it, frankly, the less I believe that there's a reason for everything. But the more I believe that with everything that happens in our lives, we can find a purpose and a lesson. Quick story. A few years ago, I was invited to sing on the National Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon. Do you guys remember that? It was like 27,000 hours long and happened over Labor Day weekend. But nevertheless, I was invited to go out to CBS Studios in Los Angeles to sing. And it was one of the coolest things that I've ever done in my life. But what was even cooler was a woman who came up to me in the studio the next day to tell me about her little boy who was, I think, about 10 at the time and happened to have the same condition as me. And they were there to sort of tell their story and how the MDA had helped them. And the woman told me that they had been in their hotel room the night before when I came on to sing. And about halfway through, her little boy looked at her and he said, "Mom, that lady's singing on TV." She wasn't quite sure where he was going with this yet. And so she just nodded and said, "Yeah." And he looked at her and seemed so confused. And he said, "But she's in a wheelchair." And then she got it and she nodded her head and she smiled and she said, "Yeah." And she told me that she watched him and that his expression started to change and that she knew in that moment that he was seeing potential for his life that he had never seen before. And honestly, that made a lifetime in a wheelchair more than okay with me because it gave my struggles every bad day, every stare, every time I was rejected by the kids on the playground, that moment made it worth it. It gave me pride in who I was, and it made me proud that I could have that kind of impact. So, above and beyond the idea that bad things exist to build our character and to give definition to the good things that we experience in life when we choose to look, I believe we can usually find a purpose and something good that we can do with the sucky thing that's happening. But choose is the operative word here. You have to be intentional and decide to find a purpose for what's happening. Sometimes the purpose will present itself like it did for me that day, but sometimes you have to ask the questions and look for a purpose that you can get behind and then put some action behind it. When I was growing up in a wheelchair, there were two very different worlds that I lived in. In one world, I was a kid and I was different from everyone else. Sorry, my notes are jumping around. And I was being made fun of and I was getting bullied. And I spent a lot of time by myself at recess because I couldn't play the way that the other kids were playing. But I also lived in another world. When I was about 4, again, the Muscular Dystrophy Association gave me the honor of representing them as the Texas State Ambassador. And eventually, when life led my family to Florida, I got to do the same thing for the state of Florida. And my responsibilities were to do things like give speeches. I actually gave my first speech when I was 4. I don't think it was a good speech, but nevertheless, I got to do things like make appearances at events and show up on telethons and thank everyone for the work that they were doing and to talk about how it affected me and my family's lives. And believe it or not, it was between the ages of 4 and 12 while I was serving the MDA where I really learned about finding purpose in our struggles. And even though I was this kid who spent time feeling lonely and sad because of my circumstances, it was also during this time when I learned that I could still have an impact on the world around me. And it's the very thing that led me ultimately to what I'm doing today, working as a speaker and a writer and an advocate for the community of disabled individuals. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you have to sign up to be a speaker or a writer or an advocate unless you want to. But what I am saying is that if you take a minute to get out of your head where all the bad thoughts live and think about how you can turn this into something good for yourself or for someone else, that is where you stop being a victim. Because isn't it better for there to be some meaning or some bigger purpose to it all than for it just to remain forever in our minds some terrible thing that just happened that we had to get over. I believe wholeheartedly that if we don't do this work to look for something meaningful in the bad things that happen, we're in danger of becoming bitter people. I've seen it happen in real life with people I love. Sometimes life pummels us. And if we don't find a constructive way to look at the rocks that we're being hit with, we can become the very worst versions of ourselves, a version that no one else will want to be around. And ultimately, maybe even a person you don't want to be around. And where does that leave you? So, I mentioned a minute ago that if we can't find a way to exit the pity party in our minds, that's when the dreaded victim status can really set in. And for some, a lot of us get really, really comfortable sitting in the victim seat. It's that pity party that we never leave. And I think that it's because the stuff that I'm talking about here is hard. It's hard to take something innately bad and put action behind it and turn it into something good. Am I right? But if you choose to stay at the pity party instead of doing some of the hard work to figure out how you can make it good somehow, your quality of life is going to suffer. See, the way I see it, there are basically two ways that bad things happen in our lives. There are times when we are just dealt a crummy hand of cards and we played no part in creating it. We didn't ask for it. Sometimes bad things just happen. My disability is a perfect example of that. My parents and I didn't cause this, we didn't ask for it. But sometimes, stay with me, sometimes we do contribute to the difficult circumstances in our lives. There are times when maybe we make poor choices in our nutrition and we create health problems for ourselves, or we get emotional and say the wrong thing to our boss at work and get ourselves in trouble. There are any number of examples that I could give you here about how sometimes we create or contribute to our own problems. And if you are the person who created that situation, at least in part, that one's easy. Own it. Take responsibility and do what you need to do to fix it or make it right. But what about the times when we didn't cause our problem? One thing that I know for certain is that when things swoop down out of nowhere and just happen to you, it's extra easy, I think, to be a victim. It's hard to be intentional and to fight and stand back up when life knocks you down. But when you choose to be strong and to fight, you also get to know that about yourself for the rest of your life, that you were brave and you were strong and you were not a victim. I will be a disabled person for the rest of my life. And I can do that at home, watching daytime TV, or I can do that out in the world, having a life where things may take a little bit longer. I may embarrass myself. I may have to be creative about how I do things, but I'm going to have some great stories to tell also. My hardships in life are actually the very things that have become my reasons for trying. My hardships are the fuel that power my success. Adversity is not an excuse, you guys. It's a reason. And what better story to tell than the one where I overcame everything and lived the life that I actually wanted rather than the one I was told that I could have? And another question that can be helpful to have a really solid answer to when times get tough is, who do you want to show up as in this life? And if you're going to take responsibility for how you respond to the hard things in life, it's a lot easier to do if you really, really, really know who you are and who you want to be. I want to do a quick exercise with you guys. If you've got some paper, just some scrap paper, or even your phone, I want you to jot down a couple of lists for me. So we're going to make actually two lists. The first list, I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes, and I want you to think about things that you've been through in your life. And this is not about comparison. Hard things that have happened in your life is your journey. Hard things that have happened in my life is my journey. There's no comparison in adversity. Pain is pain. But I want you to think of 2 or 3 things that you've been through in your life that have been really hard. And I want you to write those 2 or 3 things down. And then I want you to brainstorm all of the skills or the characteristics that you had to employ in those 2 or 3 situations to get through them. Did you have to be patient? Did you have to be a creative thinker, a problem solver? Did you have to be determined? What were the things that you needed to be or do to get through those things? So I'm going to give you maybe 2 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on the time here, but I want to give you about 2 minutes to write those things down. I feel like we need some Jeopardy music or something. It's going to be worth it, I promise. Okay. I know that wasn't 2 or 3 minutes. These are things also that you can continue on after today, but I don't want to take us over. So now that you've got that list, I want you to make a second list. And in this second list, I want you to write down 2 or 3 people who come to mind who you have seen go through hard times in their lives, specifically people who have gone through hard things who you maybe admired the way that they got through them. So write down, and don't write a novel, just, bullet point this stuff, but write down the people, what they went through. And then again, I want you to brainstorm the skills or the characteristics that either you witnessed them employing to get through things, or that you would imagine that they probably had to employ to be able to get through those things as well as they did. So I'm going to give you a minute. I love when my instructions automatically appear on the screen. It's magical. About 30 more seconds. Okay. So again, if you didn't get enough, Tracy, I see you. That's fantastic. Um, if you didn't get enough time to write down everything that you wanted to, I really encourage you to finish this sometime later today when you've got a little bit more time, because what you should have in front of you now is two lists. The first list is a list of who you are. And I want you to know that about yourself. You have been through hard things and you have stuff in you that made you effective at getting through those things. You got through those things, right? And so that list is something that you already are. You own those things. The second list is a list of who you want to be. And some of the things that you wrote down on that list may already be on your who I am list. And if they are, that's fantastic. But I'm hoping that there are at least a few things on that second list that are things that you strive to be. And what I want you to do is to put these two lists someplace where you can see them, ideally every day, but regularly, because then it's going to be in the forefront of your mind. And as you go through your days, you're going to have a constant reminder of who you are and who you want to be. And it's going to help sort of dictate your behavior and your responses in difficult situations. So here's a little secret for you. If you can get intentional about knowing what gifts you've received during challenging times and about knowing who you are and who you want to be, magic can happen. Because I will tell you that the same qualities that I've had to use or that have been instilled in me to get through hard times are the very same qualities that I needed to employ in my life in order to accomplish almost every goal that I've ever attempted. And I'm going to say something right now that may surprise you. In terms of my success in life, I believe that my disability is one of the best things that could have happened to me. And I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. In terms of my success in life, I believe that my disability is one of the best things that could have happened to me. And it's not because I wouldn't love to get myself up out of bed or change my own clothes or run a marathon or know what it feels like to watch a movie on the couch instead of in my wheelchair. It's because I believe that when we look at our challenges through the right lens and we put the skills to work that our biggest challenges have instilled in us, determination, patience, creativity, gratitude, perseverance, our biggest challenges can become our biggest advantages. They are the things that helped me to learn to drive a car that looks like NASA built it. They're the same things that helped me go through the process to adopt a daughter from a country who said that my disability made me unfit. They're the things that helped me get to the point where I got to sing on national television and record music with George Strait's musicians. And why? Because the commonality between adversity and accomplishing as a goal is that they're hard. Those are hard things to do. So oftentimes the skills and the characteristics that you acquired by going through one can help you with the other. And I want to talk about fear for just a second before we move on to the third and final truth that I want to talk about today. And there are a couple of reasons why I want to talk about fear. First, we just got done talking about the skills and the characteristics and how we gain so many when we go through hard things that can be huge assets to us when we go on to reach a goal. And one of the biggest compliments that someone can give me personally is to call me brave. And how do we become brave? By being afraid. Fear is the precursor to courage. You have to be afraid, which I would argue is one of the universal things that we all experience when something bad is happening before we can be brave. And that's the second reason why I wanted to bring it up. Fear is something that we all experience when something bad is happening. Maybe there's a threat to our health or our livelihood or to someone we love. Fear is a very prevalent emotion, I think, when we're struggling. So when something bad is happening and you feel afraid, here's the first thing that I want you to ask yourself. Is this fear real? Or is it a story that I'm telling myself about something that might happen? We've all been in these situations where we tell ourselves stories about what's going to happen, and they play on these destructive loops in our minds. And it's that self imposed pressure that goes to the darkest possible places, creating this fictitious sabotage and failure of our goals, our dreams, and our entire futures, leaving us with no security and no solutions, thus resulting in deeper and deeper levels of fear. In these situations, there can be real fear, like a tiger chasing you, or maybe a more likely example, being in a car accident. But there's also what I'm going to call conjured or manufactured fear. And but both can be equally threatening in our mind's eye, right? And what I've realized over some years of life is that so many things that suck in our lives actually suck so much worse because of our mindsets around them. In the case of conjured or manufactured fear, I think that awareness is the key. Being able to stop and realize when your mind is spinning in all sorts of directions that at some point or at this point in time haven't happened and may never happen is critical. Y'all, it's okay to be afraid. Just don't let it run amok in your mind, telling lies about what's going to happen and stop you from being brave. Because remember what I said about hope. Fear should not dictate the absence of hope. Bravery can foster hope. When you face things down and you know that you can conquer whatever gets thrown at you, that's about bravery. And the third truth that I want to talk about is the idea that there are multiple realities that can coexist at the same time. When I was a kid, I could come home on any given day, try me, crying about one big injustice or another. And every single time I came home crying, my parents' stock answer was count your blessings. And oh my goodness, when I was 7 or 8 years old and they said that to me, I usually wanted to throw them out a window because I wanted to be sad. I wanted to be frustrated. In fact, I was having coffee with my dad a while back and we were talking about this very thing, and I told him through laughter how badly I wanted to pitch them out a window every time they said that to me. And he looked at me and he said, most of the time that was the last thing we wanted to say, because my parents were not without compassion. But in their infinite wisdom, they stayed consistent in their message because they wanted me to understand that there was still so much that I could be grateful for despite the crummy day that I was having or the struggle that I was trying to navigate. They wanted me to know at my core so that I would leave the pity party and instead focus on how much I had and how much worse other people's problems could actually be. In fact, one day, one last quick story. I was at a physical therapy appointment and I was, I think, about 8. And I really, really, really did not want to be doing physical therapy in that moment. So I was being very 8 and giving my poor physical therapist a really hard time. And then I noticed a woman on a mat across the room with her physical therapist. And this woman was bald and she had scars all over her face. And I noticed that she was having some trouble moving one side of her body. And she must have noticed me staring, the very thing that I persecuted others for on a daily basis. And she said something to her physical therapist, who grabbed something and came over and sat down beside me. And she showed me an 8x10 professionally done black and white glossy photo of one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in my life. It was the 80s, so bear with me. But she was striking a pose and wearing this leopard print unitard. And she had very dramatic hair and makeup. And she told me that that was the woman across the room. She had been a model and she had been in a car accident, and she spared me the details. I was 8. But looking back, I realized that she must have suffered some sort of a traumatic brain injury. And she told me that she was having to relearn how to walk, how to eat, how to speak. And I couldn't have articulated it in the moment, but I remember feeling huge relief about the exercises that I needed to finish, and was so very glad that I was not being faced with what she was having to do. And as I was preparing to write my book, I also had the pleasure of interviewing a guy named Shawn Achor. If you guys aren't familiar with him, you need to be. He is a happiness researcher and New York Times bestseller of the book, The Happiness Advantage, and I think several other books. But I got to hear him speak once, and he talks a lot about, understandably so, happiness researcher. He talks a lot about gratitude. So when I talked to him, because gratitude had been such a force in my life, I couldn't wait to pick his brain about gratitude and the way to apply it in our lives. And the thing about gratitude that he and I both agreed on was that it's best practiced preemptively. You know, we hear a lot about gratitude practices these days, and I'm such a believer. But in the research that Shawn has done, he's asked people, for example, to sign up for 30 days of writing down 5 unique, that's important, things that have happened or that you have had in the last 24 hours. 5 things at the end of every day for 30 days. And at the beginning of the 30 days, these people were testing as high level pessimists. And at the end of just 30 days, they were testing as low level optimists in just 30 days. So you can imagine, after a year or 2 or 3 of making this a practice in your life, how much you could affect the wiring in your brain and how you process things on a daily basis. And if you know that you're going to have, every day you're going to have to write down 5 things to be grateful for, you're going to spend your life looking for things to be grateful for. And that's going to translate into how you live your life. And when bad things happen, you're going to be so much more equipped with positivity and the attributes that you need to be able to move into constructive action and a positive mindset so much more quickly and naturally. And when you're in the moment and something bad has happened, sure, writing down things that you can be grateful for can be helpful to pull you out of a funk, but it's a much more powerful tool to use to build a foundation of a certain way of thinking before anything bad ever happens. And another thing that I learned from Shawn was that when something bad is happening, before you can move into action, you have to believe, talking about hope, you have to believe that something else is possible or that things can get better. And if you've laid the foundation of gratitude and you spend your life in awareness of all of the good things that exist in your life, it's going to be much easier to do. You'll be able to recognize that even though you're sitting in a pile of something awful, challenging, sad, frustrating, this terrible reality, there are other realities that can still exist at the same time. People who love you, a roof over your head, the furry babies that snuggle you at night like mine do, the coffee in your mug, the air in your lungs. So in closing, I want you to remember the definition of adversity. It's not going to be fun. And you don't have to like what's happening. You don't. Adversity builds character in us, though. I am stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and more accepting and patient now than I was a kid. And I credit my bad days and my difficulties with so much of that. I've also created habits. I had to be intentional about it, and it took time. It's a muscle that has to be built. But I've learned that when something bad happens, to ask, what can this teach me? How can it make me a better person? Because it's easy to feel sorry for yourself and to be a victim. It's harder to approach challenges with intention and determination to find the good, but it's so much more worth it if you do. And over time, it will become a habit. If absolutely nothing else gives you comfort, I do believe in acceptance. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that some of the crummy cards that I've been dealt have been intended to serve as an example for someone else. Sometimes you may never know the influence that you've had on someone else. And sometimes the lesson in all of this may be for someone that you'll never meet, but you can still believe that it's there. And at a minimum, I believe that every single challenge that we go through, big or small, can teach us courage and patience and grace. And when I remember that, I can always find peace in my situation. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Oh my God, Mindy, that was amazing. I had to turn my camera off in the background. I know you could see me, and because I was starting to cry when you were telling some of these stories. It really touches everyone, and you're such an inspiration. Like you mentioned it, but a lot of times we're going through hard things, and when you're in the middle of hard things, it feels like the end of the world, your world, right? And as you said, pain is pain, regardless of what your situation is. And a lot of times, especially over the pandemic, I had a lot of those days. And I'll tell you that I would listen to your podcast and it would lift me up in such a way, and to say, why I'm sitting here like lamenting things that in the big scheme of things don't matter, that 5 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, I wouldn't even remember this thing that I'm going through.
Yeah.
But what a great opportunity to learn from the situation and become stronger because of the situation and see the blessings in the situation. As Scott mentioned it before, and you mentioned it today as well now, is things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And when you have that perspective, that changes the way you see everything.
Yeah, well, and I think it can really change the tone of what's happened to you, because, like you said, you made a really good point that, 5, 6 months, 5 years from now, is this thing going to matter? And, if it's something that's been, really traumatic in our lives, a lot of times it may still matter 5 years from now, but we can influence the way that we feel about it, because maybe we've empowered ourselves to look at it and to learn from it and to become better people because of it. And that gives us the opportunity to make it more than just something bad that happened. Yeah.
I thought also was so powerful when you said that your disability has been one of the biggest blessings in your success, and one of the things that the reasons why you are where you are today. And you are for sure impacting so many lives and influencing so many lives with your story. And it's not about what happens to you or what cards you're dealt with, but how you react to those things and how you who you become through those
Yeah.
things that really matters at the end of the day. And it's, as you said, is a choice that you need to make, that only you can make.
100%. Absolutely. Because, if you think about it too, again, a year from now, the people that are in your bubble that have maybe watched you go through something hard, do you want them to be talking about the bad thing that happened to you, or do you want them to be talking about I don't can I say this, the badass way that you got through it? And that's what I would prefer people to be talking about, rather than just something, oh, I feel so bad that this terrible thing happened to my friend or my sister or my daughter. I want people to see the person that it's made me, and the way that I was able to face something down and kind of kick it to the curb. So that's I think when you can really win in a tough situation.
One, and under that definition of being a winner or being successful, I think you are one of the most successful people that I've ever met. You're
Oh,
such an inspiration. I'm so grateful for you to accept the invitation. I'm so glad that we made it happen, because we've been trying to get together for a long
I
time. Again,
know.
we've never met in person, only through
Mhm.
social media and virtually. And it's such a blessing to have you here and hear to your story and the perspective that you bring, because I think a lot of us sometimes get lost again in hard things, and we make
Yeah.
those hard things an excuse not to continue to grow and continue to better ourselves and continue to show up as a better version of ourselves,
Yeah.
instead of using it as an excuse to prove that even through hard things or in the midst of hard things, we can become better and grow and impact others. Because a lot of times, you mention it, we don't realize it, but there's so many people that are watching you, and they're
Yeah.
watching how you are managing those tough situations.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's important, because you know one thing I didn't say is that when I was given this diagnosis, it wasn't just given to me. It was given to my family. It was given to my parents, my sister, my future husband, and it changed the way that we live. It changed the kinds of houses that we live in. It changed, the kinds of vacations that we can take. And so I think too, it's important to sort of step outside of yourself. Even though I'm the one riding around in the wheelchair all day long, there are a lot of other people's lives who've been affected by this as well. And so I think that that's just something that's really important to understand, and to make sure that we're accounting for other people's feelings and how they're having to adjust and deal with something bad that may be happening that affects them as well. And then, like you said, there are people who maybe aren't personally affected by what's happened, but they know you, they love you, they're watching. And I think there's an opportunity there to set a good example, and to show them kind of the way to get back, or to be adaptable. And like you said, adversity is not an excuse, it's a reason to maybe try something different, or do it differently, or whatever the case may be. And then the next time they're facing something hard, they may, maybe yours is the example that they'll think of and be like, oh, no, 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 I want to do it like Carolina did.
Amazing. And as I said, I know you are an example and an inspiration for so many people.
Oh, well,
And
thank you.
talking about that, how can people watching, some are watching live, some will be watching the replay,
Mhm.
how can they contact you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn more about you and all the amazing things that you have to share with the world?
Yeah, I'm on lots of social media, so you can find me on Instagram at Mindy Henderson Speaks, and Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm just Mindy Henderson, and then my website. Oh, you've got it up there. Is MindyHendersonCo.com, and you can send me DMs. I love to hear from people, so I would love to connect with anybody who's up for it, and send me your notes and your thoughts, and I would love to support you in whatever you're going through. So, feel free to reach out if something hard is happening, and I'm happy to send you a virtual high five or give you some encouraging words.
Amazing. And don't forget to subscribe to Minda's podcast, The Truth About Things That Suck. And make sure that you follow her in social media. She's always sharing these nuggets of inspiration and insights that are just amazing. And the next time that you're going through a hard time, through a hard thing, go to social media, look for Mindy, listen to her, and just like today, she might, evoke a cry, an emotion. She will definitely lift you up when you're in the midst of hard things, because I think that you do that every day with everything that you do. And for that reason, I'm so thankful
Well,
that
thank
you're
you.
here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. And if it's okay, I would love to also give a plug to the Quest podcast that I do for MDA. If there's anyone listening who maybe has a disabled person in their life, or they just want to know more about how things in our society affect the community of disabled people, things like employment and so many things that we're going to be talking about, or that we are talking about, you can just go to mda.org/quest. And you can find the podcast there. I would love for people to listen. And Carolina, I just want to say, I think that putting together this free conference that you put together for your birthday is such a beautiful thing that you did. And I love the gift that you're giving to everybody else by hosting this conference. So I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. I can't think of a better way of celebrating my birthday and entering a new decade than being here, sharing with people, the people that have inspired me and lift me and that I learn from every day. They say that you are the combination of the 5 people that you surround yourself. And a lot of times those people don't even have to be people that in real life, face to face. Like a lot of those people that I surround myself are people like you that I met through their podcasts and their books and in social media. And, a lot of times I think it's important that we audit what are we following out there, who are we following, and try to follow accounts and people like you that inspire us and teaches us and really become virtual mentors in a sense. And I'm grateful for you to be one of those people.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel the same way. And I love what you're doing in the world. And again, I'm just grateful to be a part of your day.
Awesome. So I am, as a way of saying thank you, making a donation to Feeding America for every of the speakers that are coming today to speak. But today, I want to do a donation to the MDA on your behalf.
Oh,
I know that
so
that's
nice.
something that is close to your heart, and that, I've came to learn a lot. A lot of times, we just don't know what we don't know. And creating that awareness about all the things that you talk about in the podcast. And I can't wait to listen to the Quest podcast to really see things from a different perspective because,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times we look at things from our own privilege and we don't really look and understand from other people's perspective. So, as a just humble
Ugh.
thank you, I want to do that today.
Oh, I am so honored. Thank you so much for that. That's, they do amazing work, and really do things that that really empower the muscular dystrophy community of individuals and help them live their lives and reach all of their goals. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Once again, thank you very much, Mindy, for being here. Um, I have no words to express my gratitude. I am looking forward to have you back again, maybe on the podcast where we
Yes,
can continue the
please.
conversation. Um, I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. See you in a few.